Hello again, welcome to Bridlington on the 11th of September 2023. For once the tide is out. Let's walk down to this beautiful beach. This is actually South Shore at Bridlington. A place where I've been visiting for about 73 years. It's good to exercise extreme caution down on this beach. It's possible to get trapped by the tide. If this sea mist comes in any further and one happens to be near the water's edge and you don't know the way back to the shore, it can be very dangerous indeed. But here on this day in September, I'm confident that the mist will go. It's clearing now, the sun will come up and it's going to be a beautiful day. And my name is Mike and I'm from West Yorkshire, and I'm recording places for posterity in the hope that they might be interesting to people in the future. What motivated me to do this was looking through YouTube and not being able to find many video clips from or film clips from days gone by from my own childhood. So what was it like here when I was a child? Well, we used to come here from just south of Leeds. The West Riding of Yorkshire, as it was called at that time, was quite heavily polluted with a lot of soot from coal chimneys, and those kids would have blackened shirt collars when we went to school. We used to think we were dirty, but actually it was grime and filth in the atmosphere. Not so much from diesel engines, but from coal fires. To arrive in this place for the weekend or for a day trip, it seemed like paradise compared with the living conditions we were experiencing back home. Back home at the time meant a single coal fire in a house, no heating at all in your bedroom. But there was also a general feeling of everything being okay because our parents had just been through World War II, and we were being told that everything was now okay with the world. The Nazis have been defeated and nothing to worry about. That was the war, World War II, the war to end all wars. Well, of course, that was exactly the same thing that was said about the Great War in so-called Great War in World War I now. My very earliest memories step back to about 1950. And I can remember sweet rationing at that time. Saw a television for the first time in someone's house as a child when I was about 5 years old. We were all called round to watch Crackerjack once a week, and all the kids from the street would pile into this house and watch in wonder at a television set with good old Eamon Andrews presenting Crackerjack, where these privileged kids were all given prizes, but us kids got nothing. To move forward a little bit, now I'm about 10 years old and I'm starting to notice some things on television that were quite concerning, and that is the napalm bombing. I'm not going to mention countries, I'm not political, but the napalm bombing of countries in Southeast Asia and sort of napalm, it's a jelly-like burning petrol substance, isn't it? This was happening to just a lot of innocent people, and the whole thing, I think, just because one lot didn't like another lot, one regime didn't like another, whatever. Anyway, it was disturbing to see this. It went on and on and on. Great big bombers dropping napalm bombs, and it's on television, and as a child and you're watching this and you're thinking, I thought World War II was supposed to be over. But then there was that sort of childlike naive thinking that war was a one-off thing, and it's only much later on in life you realise, of course, that human beings have got this great propensity for attacking and killing each other in conflicts both large and small. And if you're interested in that. And for example, England, I invite you to look up on YouTube the War of the Roses. Even better, look it up on Wikipedia and you'll see the mass slaughter that took place over decades just among ourselves here in Yorkshire and Lancashire and further south, where different factions fought each other to death and hundreds died on battlefields, all using swords and archers using arrows and so on, you know, knights on presumably on horseback with lances. Terrific carnage. Yeah, doing the maximum bloodshed possible with the weapons at the time. Now if we step forward a bit further, I'm probably about 11 years old at this stage, and the nuclear air raid siren went off, and I'm playing with a friend in the field. I'm 11 years old, and we hear the wail of an air raid siren across the Calder Valley, which is where I used to live. And of course it's the 3-minute warning. You're going to get this 2 or 3 minute warning, and then the nuclear bomb, the airstrikes come, and we already knew what will be hit. It would be Leeds, about 9 miles north. Then it would be Sheffield, about 20 miles south. Then it would be Bradford, about 89 miles, and so on. You know, so you expected these massive nuclear airbursts, and of course the television and the press are all hyped up for this, almost as though, you know, they're actually willing a war on. I mean, that doesn't seem to have changed, does it? It ended up with me and my friend crouching down at the side of a field, which is where we were playing, because we used to play outside in those days. You know, we sort of been looking in a pond where there are some frogs, and there's this there's actually a World War II air raid siren now being sounded again as a warning for a nuclear attack, and it turned out to be a false alarm, and we didn't know that as kids. Can you imagine if you've got a kid and they experience something like that, and they're crouching down at the side of a ditch wondering whether to throw themselves into the water or wait until you see the first airburst? My father said rather laconically it would have been too late, you'd have been fried, you know, before you had a chance to throw yourself into this ditch of water. So that was aged at 11 years old. That thing sort of repeated itself with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where I went to school. And at school, this is primary school. At primary school, and we were shown the nuclear fallout shelter, where we would take shelter if there was a nuclear attack on that day. And it was a specific day, right when the crisis ended. And my father said to me, there might be a nuclear attack today, I'll try to get home if possible. But just imagine that. I mean, have things really changed? You know, you've got the seemingly war going on between Russia and Ukraine at the moment, and I'm not commenting on that, but I'm commenting on the press, you know, on the news, almost seemingly willing this on, you know, as though encouraging things. That is some of the backdrop of my childhood. You would come to Bridlington and you'd be able to put all of these worries behind you. I mean, over there in the distance, there are South Shore Holiday Village. My aunts had a little chalet there, a little like a beach hut sort of thing, where you used to go, and it was really good fun. Just over there, where you can see those boats, there used to be 2 RAF launchers parked well into the 1950s and 60s, leftovers from World War II, where they used to rescue airmen cast away at sea from, you know, if the plane's engine failed over the sea and they managed to bail out and got their little rubber dinghy. I had to get into that little rubber dinghy because as I've said before, survival time in this sea is measured in minutes, not hours, due to the effect of the cold on the muscles. You can hear the seagulls now on this day I remember early morning, my very earliest memory is probably 1950, and it's over there in the distance. There were no big wind turbines there, of course, and there was an RAF Shackleton coming over from Coastal Command, and that had the Merlin engines on, which was a major British engine during World War II, although listening to various people who had been in the Royal Air Force at the time, the Napier engine was a better engine actually, but the Merlin engine had been built in such a way that its bottom-ended bit was strong enough to take significant increases in power, resulting in progression when it was in the Spitfire anyway, and it's also in the Lancaster bombers. And again, I'm talking about wartime, but that was my childhood. There was always this echo of things in the background, Here we are, look again at Bridlington Crane Wharf. Now, I'd been looking at some old photographs of Bridlington here, and if you look at that the pier there, just disregard the metal structure of the pier, just look at this stub end here. There was something here called Crane Wharf going right back to the 1590s, so that's going right back into the time of Queen Elizabeth I of England, and there was something here. It was made of wood, of course, not stone, well, presumably. There were piers here as well at that time, and there was a pier over there, further inwards towards this way, towards me, but made out of wood and going so far out, and that structure I think went right back to Roman times. And through it all was the Gypsy Race River, the river that comes from the back of the harbour, goes through and out. You can't see it now, of course, because it's flooded partly, is the harbour, but the tide may be falling. We might see that later. That would have been there for absolutely centuries, 1,000 years ago, more. In Roman times, there was also a harbour here, because it's all constructed of wood, but at the back of it all is this structure here, at that time constructed in wood. And if we look back here, now of course you've got these buildings, but there was a street that led straight up from the harbour up there, and the continuation of the street on top of there, that street led down onto the harbour here, and ships would be unloaded on what we now call the Crane Wharf. There must have been a crane of some sort there. I would imagine, going back in time, it might have been a steam winched crane, and going back further than that, it must have been by hand, because here at Bridlington Harbour, it was a major port, and there were big sailing ships used to come in. I'm talking about hundreds of years ago now. They come in here. This was a wooden structure going out, and it didn't go as far out. There wasn't that curve on the end, which is a relatively recent thing. So if you imagine all of these structures being wood, and of course with it being wood, a wooden structure, the wind can blow through it. So you get your big sailing ships in here coming up from London, coming up over from Europe and other parts of the world as well, offloading and loading here at the Crane Wharf. So the streets going up into town there. I thought the continuity was a remarkable thing. In particular, the Gypsy Race River, which as children, as tiny kids, we used to call it Pooh River for obvious reasons, a derogatory term for it. It's actually called the Gypsy Race River. We'll walk now onto the North Pier at Bridlington, and you see there's no one here. It reminds me very much of 11th of September, just by, of course, that's the day of the huge atrocity committed against the Americans, 2011, isn't it? I mean 9/11. Here we can see the cliffs of Flamborough being revealed. Now those cliffs are made out of chalk, and here we see the relatively recent sea defences. I'm talking now about 150 years ago or something like that. Because at one time, the whole of this area here was actually earth. So you had this, you had the wooden harbour here, and the stub of a wharf here, which is called the Crane Wharf. And the harbour will be packed with sailing ships. The far harbour wall there, the south pier, would be further in, and also would be of wood. Now that's the west over there where we've just been looking, and most of the wind here blows from the west. It's blowing from the west now, as you can see from the flags on the Yorkshire Bell there. But the wind is blowing from the west, so that would take these sail ships. Of course, you've got no engines when you go back beyond a certain time. Take these sailing ships straight out to sea. There's a sandbar just out there under the water called Smithick Bank, which is a bar of sand. Now sometimes at extreme low tide you can see waves actually breaking on it. It's just under the surface. So you'll get, this was made of earth, just a sloping earth coming down from the town, and further on out there, I'll just try to zoom in a bit, there was a raised beach out there, and a sort of a shingle there, or pebbles, big pebbles on the beach made out of chalk, big rounded, about the size of a football, you know, flattened. And in fact that sort of thing is still there, so it must weather, the rock must weather out of Flamborough there, Flamborough Head, and form a sort of a shingle beach up there. But my point being that was the same in Roman times even. There's a sort of a notch in the cliffs over there, which it seems the Vikings tried to cut off the headland, but never quite made it. Must have been a tremendous effort digging through the chalk there. But that was called, in Roman times, it was called South Haven. So that was our, oh sorry about the wind noise, by the way, but that was our childhood in the very early 1950s, moving on to the late 1950s. You know, the gradual realisation that the two wars, First World War, Second World War, that our parents and grandparents had experienced wasn't actually the end of wars, and that these things would just continue. Yorkshire Bell here, low down at the moment, and those steps over there, just at the back of the boat there, the white boat, which I've said before, there was this guy used to, for decades I suspect, he used to row people across, go to the South Pier, no problem, you get on the boat, cross the River Styx as we used to call it, give him 2p. You didn't have it clutched between your teeth, of course, but nevertheless it was great fun. You've got the yellow rowing boats coming out of the harbour. It was a great time at Bridlington. Of course, the Yorkshire Bell was here. The Yorkshire Bell's always been here throughout my life. I think it was built in Hull in 1947. Well, and there was a prior Yorkshire Bell to this one that was blown up during World War II by a mine in the Humber estuary. But there were other pleasure boats here as well. There was the Boys' Own, which we used to go on. The Boys' Own had a different cut to the hull, you know, a different line of the hull. Like the Yorkshire Bell, I always thought it has, and it still has, you know, quite a sophisticated shape to the front there, you know, to the bow. Whereas the Boys' Own was much blunter cut. There was the construction. There was the Bridlington Queen, which was made out of wood, and I've mentioned before, it seems as though that was the ship that tapped its hull on the bottom there, and allegedly sank pretty quickly in 5 feet of water. Some people said that was a rock. As I said in my last video, there was also a converted tug called the Yorkshireman, and we used to love to go on that because it's like a commercial vessel. In fact, at times it was still used as a tug. but it also had seats on, so you could go out there. These trips used to go out off Flamborough Head. Now you can imagine, you know, as children in West Yorkshire, it's pretty grim and grimy with the coal fires and so on and so forth. You could go and play in the fields, which is what we did. I mean, you knew everything in every field near home. You know, there was a certain pond where there were frogs, there was another pond where there were sticklebacks, and there was yet another pond where you could see newts of all types. The conservationists would have a fit if they could see all these newts that we used to catch and put in jam jars. We're talking about being 80 years old now, you know, well below the age of criminal responsibility for catching a newt and putting it in a jar. I don't think there was any law against that at the time anyway. We used to put sticklebacks in a jar as well. And what we used to do is we used to get a piece of wood, and you know, fishing lines for us poor kids in those days. We used to get a length of stick, you know, off a tree, and some cotton from our mother's cotton bobbin, black cotton preferably, and catch a worm in the garden, and tie the worm onto the cotton, dangle the worm in front of the sticklebacks, and it's a small worm. The stickleback gets it in its mouth, whips it out of the water. It doesn't let go in time, so you've got the stickleback pulled out on the bank. Stickleback gets its mouth on the worm. All it can think of is swallowing the worm, but whoop, it's out of the water. You've got it in your jam jar. If anyone from another country is wondering what a stickleback is, it's a tiny 3 or 5 spined freshwater fish that's about as big as your thumb. You've got this tranquility and peace at Bridlington, and yet you turn the television on and it's all about this this war currently, you know, Russia, Ukraine, etc. Reminds me of the petrol bombing going on in Southeast Asia in the early 1950s, and no doubt a previous generation to me had all that through World War One. If you go back far enough, you know, you're talking about the Middle Ages in England, because it is England we're talking about, Yorkshire in particular, because this is Yorkshire. This is East Yorkshire. It used to be called the East Riding of Yorkshire, and I used to live in the West Riding of Yorkshire, now called just West Yorkshire. But all this mass slaughter of people and so on, it seems to be just never ending. I think that will be the final epitaph of the human species, really. If another species comes from another planet and looks us all up in millions of years' time and looks at some of the artefacts, and you can imagine one alien saying to another, well, they really did like war, didn't they? So anyway, that's that, and let's put all that behind us now and have a look at the beauty of Bridlington, and in particular North Beach, Bridlington. Now, if you looked at my last video, you'll notice that I was talking about a 6.4 metre high tide right at this spot, and we'll now go down here. You can see the tide's actually, I think it's actually coming in. I think it's actually coming in. I'm looking at the water line there, where the water is actually going on to fresh sand. Let's be very careful with this. Didn't get caught out with the tide as a child. Now, I came down to here on the last video, and I remember the water was breaking about here. That's about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 steps down, and you can see exactly what that means, how deep the actual water was. If I can walk down here without going head first, got to be a bit careful. Here we are, the beach. You can see the also the wisdom that went into making this wall, which is the sea defences. This is the sea wall in Bridlington, and we went to a place called Tacloban in the Philippines about 4 months ago, and this is what they need. This is the substantial sort of wall they need. But anyway, here you can see the people who built it made it so you can climb up. If you fall, you get trapped by the tide over there for some reason, which is possible. There's a raised bit there where the sand is higher, just possible just if you're not aware to get caught by the tide there. There's no steps up, although there are lots of steps further up there. You just see the steps further on. But here, if you get caught out, you can climb up here, even with a 6 metre tide, provided there are no big waves, and you know there really are often big waves here. You've still got a sporting chance of making it back here and getting off the beach. Now that's totally unlike when they built the harbour wall there. You can see that harbour wall, and that's very soon going to be exposed by the tide. Now there's someone died here relatively recently. Someone walked down onto the beach at night time, walked out here, and I think the tide came up behind them. The tide came in here, right, and they're still stood on a sandbar out there, but somewhere near the end presumably. Because it's dark, totally dark, couldn't find their way, didn't know the harbour presumably, couldn't find their way back here and round here because the steps are quite hidden. You can see it's a sheer wall there. There's nowhere where you can partially climb up and escape. And you can also see at the end how the water is shallower than it is here. There's quite a trap if you're not careful as this. And it's something that was drummed into us as children at Bridlington to know the sea, to stay aware of when a fog was rolling in, or a sea fret as we call it here, so you don't get caught out, to know when the tide was coming in, when it was going out. And we've got Bridlington's most important ship, the Gypsy Race Dredger, because without that the harbour wouldn't function, it would just fill up with mud. We'll walk down here underneath the crane wharf. You can just see the Gypsy Race River there entering the harbour. And just think back, if you could go back to 1590, when that map that I saw was drawn up, and Elizabeth I is still on the throne, and in fact during the time of Henry VIII, you'd still have the Gypsy Race River coming through the river, as it must have come through for hundreds of years. And the last ice age would probably have something to say about that, of course. But all of this structure here, you know, the beams and so on, it all used to be wood. And actually, I thought all of these stones were just debris, but some of them apparently were here. It's like a stone fill on when it was a wooden wharf here. Could have a lot of it's just debris and junk, isn't it, really? But what I'm trying to say is some of these stones that you see, the big rounded ones and so on, you know, they must have been here for hundreds of years, from when this used to be a wooden structure. There used to be another wharf out here as well. Sometimes you can see that's relatively new, is the metal work there that used to go further back. I suspect the They put that there just so that people could drive their car and park outside their offices or something, or make it wider. It was just a much narrower pathway at the top there. And as I've said before, at the end of the harbour there used to be a mud-banked river, Gypsy Race River coming through, and there would be boats hauled up on each side of that. And in fact, facilities going straight up into town from the end there, but they covered all that over and put the car park there for better or worse in more recent years, in fact relatively recently. You'll notice another unfortunate day with lots of wind blowing over the microphone there on the phone. But actually, I mean, at one time that would be just the job. It would be perfect for the great big sailing ships here, and I'm talking about ships, not sailing cobbles, that used to come in here loading with goods in the pre-engine era of hundreds of years ago. That wind blowing out from the west, as it almost always does, would take the boats out to sea there without any difficulty. You see the conditions improving now. The sun is burning off the early morning mist, and Flamborough Head there and Sowerby are becoming clearer. Interestingly, I find it interesting that those chalk cliffs are actually the original pre-Ice Age shoreline. And in fact, as you go around and have a look at the south shore there, you'll see a lot of it is just earth and sand. One of that over there is the pre-Ice Age shoreline. It was miles back inland, right to the chalk cliffs on the Yorkshire Wolds, I think. And so the cliffs there, there's a promenade going out to about the end of where my finger is there, and further on it's sort of earth cliffs, and as you go on down towards Sperm Point, I don't know, it's probably 89 miles away down there, it's actually eroding away as the cliff. But it's not the original shoreline. I mean, it's anything original. Anyway, if you go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, millions of years, the whole thing was different. It's all evolving and changing, isn't it? There's no defending the coastline there because, say, prior to the last Ice Age, it just wasn't there. So I'll end this video here, and at another date I'll probably go further down the coast there and show you some of the cliffs. So it's goodbye from Bridlington. I hope you enjoyed this video and my rambling talk about my childhood, 1950s, what it was like to be a child in 1950s West Yorkshire, and what trips to Bridlington meant for us in those days. Take care now, and bye for now.